This is Justice Worriers, a podcast where we think about things that are right and wrong in our world and how Christian ideas can help us respond to them. We prefer hard questions over easy answers, and we'd love you to join us in our ramblings. Listen in and contact us using the links in the show notes. Hello and welcome to Justice Worriers, episode 40. My name's Andy and as usual I'm joined by Leah.
Hi there.
And by Jörg.
Hello.
And we have the privilege today of being joined by Sue. Say hi, Sue.
Hello.
So we've been you've had to put up with one episode of us sort of moaning about church and asking what is church and what are we going to, is it real and is there any point going and stuff like that. And we thought rather than you listening to us moan any more about that, we'd talk to Sue, who we know has got a lot of experience of the kind of support that church can give, but also a lot of experience of different things that we might want to call church. So we thought it'd be a good time to ask you, Sue, to tell a bit about your story. So would you? This is a very open question, but would you mind telling us a bit of your story?
Yeah. I sort of was introduced to church, I would say, as a child. My parents regularly went to church, Staines Congregational Church, and so I went through Sunday school and was a member. Really becoming to faith really about the age of 11 with a Sunday school teacher who just talked to me and my friend. There was only two of us in the class that day for some reason. Usually there was a big class, but I think it was midst of summer holidays and there was only two of us. And she decided to abandon the lesson and just talk to us about how Christ died for us and how to become a Christian. And we both became Christians. And so that's really where my faith story sort of starts from there, and that church were a great support for us. I went on to youth group, and there I met my wonderful husband Andy through the church youth group, and we grew up through that, and then we went on to a church plant in Stanwell Moor when we got married, and went sort of involved in sort of the leadership of church in that, because it was a small little church plant. And I think that's really where we started I started to get a different view of church, really, because we're doing a church plant and we realised that church wasn't really just bums on seats on a Sunday. You're talking about community and actually going out and meeting people's needs. And there's no point saying, come along on Sunday if the person's really, really struggling in the situation that they are in at the time. So I think that was my first sort of inkling of there's more to church than church, if you see what I mean. And so that carried on and things changed, and we ended up at King's Church in Staines, which is quite a charismatic church. Andy and I had a little boy, Jake, and then we had Katie, but sadly Jake died in 2008. He had a brain tumour. He was diagnosed in the March and he died in the May. And that's again where we experienced church in a different setting, because suddenly we were confronted with something which some people would say, well, things don't go wrong if you're a Christian. That's fine. Well, that's garbage. Those things still go wrong whether you're Christian or not. And Christ isn't the panacea of things. You don't become a Christian to make your life good. And then our church really supported us. They got round us. They prayed for us. They prayed for Jake's healing. But not only did they pray, they actually did the physical stuff. They came round, they brought meals, they sat with us, they cried with us. They were just alongside us and upheld us. And I really felt that they were sort of, I mean, three of our friends were actually stayed with us on the weekend that Jake died, because we were so tired, because we'd been awake for, I don't know, ages. And we knew that he was really, really poorly on that night, that we were still praying that he would be completely healed. And they said, look, we'll stay awake so that you can sleep, so that if there's a change, we'll wake you up. And that's what they did. And when Jake died that morning at 8 o'clock on that Sunday morning, they were there with us. And our best friend, one of our best friends, Tim, who our son's now named after, stayed with us for weeks afterwards, until we said, you're okay to go now. And that's church, really, because he said, I will stay as long as you need me, because we just couldn't bear the room being empty. So he slept in Jake's room, which he found afterwards, he said, was really difficult. But yeah, he did that because he knew that we couldn't stand the bare room, and so that was fantastic that he did that for us, and it's so special. So we found church in a different way then. That was with them being alongside us, and and they were like us in some ways. They didn't understand what had gone on, why Jake died, and they continued to pray for him to, I mean, even to be risen from the dead as well. And I had such faith that he would, that I took his shoes in my handbag to the funeral, because I knew that he was in the coffin without shoes on, and when he was going to get risen from the dead, he wouldn't have shoes to wear. So it was just, and I kept on praying, well, okay, well, Jesus was in the tomb for 3 days, so you'd go through all of those stages. But all that time, my church leaders and stuff like that, they just prayed with us. They didn't say, no, your teaching is wrong, your thinking is wrong. They just loved us. They just held us. And I remember one of them saying to us, I said, oh, well, I shouldn't be thinking. He said, you think and you do whatever you feel you need to do right now, because you're grieving and this is a horrendous thing's happened to you. At the moment, you just shout it out, because God is big enough to hear your questions, to hear your pain, to hear your cries. He's big enough for that. And so they almost gave me permission to shout at God and really scream at him and say, I don't understand. So they were, I would say they were brilliant. I mean, obviously some people say the wrong things at the wrong time, but we're human. And then eventually, I mean, because we'd taken Jake to the Holiday Bible Club at St John's, and we'd moved here, and then we had the intention of actually, before Jake got ill, to move to St John's Church, because we felt that it's really important to be at a church in the community that you live in. That's one of the things that we always feel, and we wanted to be able to be in a church which we could walk to. But then Jake said, Mum, I want to be carry on going to Sunday school with my friends. So we carried on going to King's. So we hadn't, but he loves St John's because it's got bells. And we've got a balcony, and he thought that was really cool. But he went, so we carried on going there. But it got to the stage after Jake had died that I could still see him running underneath the chairs, and people would talk to me with their head on a slight tilt, and how are you? Or I'd feel like I'd got bereaved parent written across my forehead. And I thought, I just need, well, we both felt, I think, we felt we both needed to be somewhere where we could just be, because we were very involved in the church. I was a trustee, we were youth leaders, and we were very involved in the church at that time. So we were house group leaders, stuff like that. So we we came along to St John's really just to escape, so that we could just sit at the back, just be. And that's what, I mean, St John's was so welcoming to us that they allowed us to do that. They allowed us to just be. And I remember one time, it was a Christmas Eve, and it's really weird because Liz Washer brought it up recently, because I was talking to her because she's recently lost her daughter. And I remember it's Christmas Eve, and Katie was running around doing the Christmas nativity thing, which is all usually not nativity, the Christmas Eve service, where it's just all chaos, and there's 1,000 angels and 6 million Marys and 20 Josephs and stuff, and it was all chaos, it was all going off, and everybody was laughing, and I was just sobbing. And Liz came up to me and just sat beside me, and that was it. She didn't do anything, she didn't huddle me or anything, she just sat beside me and just let me cry. And she said afterwards that somebody said, what's the matter with Sue? So I think she said, she's in pain, just let her be in pain, because sometimes you just have to just do that and go through that. And I think that has been so good that now things have changed, and the pain of losing Jake has not gone. It's just changed, and that has changed my outlook on everything. I think before I was very black and white, but now there's shades of grey, and not because I'm grey, but there's difference. Things aren't black and white, and God doesn't just work like that. And if you don't pray like that, because I remember at one house group I went to in St John's, at one stage they said, this woman came up. She's not in the church anymore, but she just said, "Well, do you think Jake died because of some sin that he'd done?" And I just went, "No." Burst into tears, obviously, and I just said that is completely and utterly false. And I said it doesn't matter how much we prayed, it wouldn't have made any difference. And I said we couldn't have prayed any more, and it isn't. And God doesn't do measures. Oh, well, they've only prayed 3,000 times for that, not 3,001. So I won't answer that prayer. That's garbage too. So, but I know that in past I may well have thought that. So it's really a matter of grace to people who don't understand now, that it's not that they're necessarily trying to be nasty, it's just they don't necessarily understand. And I think now, as my role has changed and being involved with CAP and the people that I see, there's so much pain and so much suffering out there.
Could you say what CAP is?
Oh, sorry. CAP is Christians Against Poverty. It's I work as a debt centre manager now for the church at St John's, and I go out and see people who are struggling with unmanageable debt. So we talk to anybody. It doesn't matter what religion they are, or non-religion, or sex, or whatever. We will just help them with their debts, and we do it free because we want to show them how much God loves them. But we won't also push it down their throats. If somebody will be open and say that we've come from church and we'll offer to pray for them, but if they say no, that doesn't make any difference about how we deal with their debt. And we'll invite them to things, but if they don't want to come, that's also cool. So yeah, and that's how I've seen so much pain in those things, but I've also seen God change things around in those lives because I go with a befriender. And the idea of having a befriender is one of the things is that they pray in the background, but also that there's another person they can connect to. So if they do decide to come along to a hog roast or whatever it is, there's somebody else that they know. So that's really what it is. But I have seen God move miraculously in the expanded church, as I see, which is with my clients, and they don't necessarily mean to be going to church, but they're still part of our church because they're people that we're touching with the love of God.
Those who died are justified for wearing the badge. They're the chosen whites that justify those that died. They're the chosen whites.
Do you find it hard when you see miracles happen in other people's lives, when you prayed so hard for a miracle?
Sometimes. Yeah, sometimes I want to punch them. Yeah, true. Other times, I suppose, yeah, sometimes I do. Sometimes I think, well, how come it worked for them and it doesn't work for me? Almost like a magician thing, and which is garbage. But on the other hand, that's belittling what Jake was to me, and he wasn't magician's trick or anything like that. And I really believe God's got a plan, but it wasn't. Was saying to Andy, well, we were talking the other day, and he said the motto for our life should be, well, that didn't quite go to plan, did it? Because it's not what we thought it was going to be. It's amazing. I mean, I've got 4 wonderful children, but one of them's being babysitted by an amazing God. 3 of them are here with me. So if anybody asks how many children I've got, I will always say 4. And I said 3 are here with me. And if Jake hadn't died, probably wouldn't have had Timmy and Harry. And they're an amazing blessing to us. Katie's life would have been completely different. She would have had an older brother. She wouldn't have been the eldest. I feel she's probably missed out on some things because of that, but also she's gained things because she's the eldest. So you can't. As our builder would say, as he looks at things, it is what it is.
That's a very British word.
I can't change it.
In my experience, builders normally say that about problems that they've caused, though.
Yes, and it was a problem.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it is what it is. It's like, but you made that happen.
Yes, exactly. Well, we won't go into the whole history of my extension, it's something that we have to deal with life as it is now, and that's a life where Jake is still a part of it, but he's not here experiencing it with us. And
I'm really touched by that. Also, the way we've heard your husband talk about it as well, but the way you've described it, because the shades of grey, the complexity, the different ways life could go, and even without a death of a child, like I could think of millions of decisions in my life where things that happen, they could have gone a completely different way. And yet, when we're in a church service, the songs we sing, sometimes the sermons proclaim a very simple message of God's coming for you, he's going to help you, he's here, or if you do this, then this will follow. Sometimes the biblical texts themselves lend themselves to that. What do you make of that disconnect, and how can we bring more of those shades of grey into the church? Because it often feels to me like we're actually immunizing ourselves. Like it can become a space where you kind of close off against complexity. You go for the simple answers because that's where you feel safe. But then we know in the back of our heads that's not how life works. So how can we bridge that gap a bit better?
I think one of the things would be to share more testimonies of people of what life is really like.
So not just the victorious ones where
things are poo, aren't they? Sometimes I've with my best friend Alison, who's one of the ones who stayed with me, we have this phrase, because she's going through rheumatoid arthritis. She's in so much pain a lot of the time. She's a wonderful Christian, beautiful worship leader, done some fantastic songs. But we'll say it's an SBP day today, which stands for bum poo. And
Such language.
I know. Sorry, I had to cut that out. But that will just be it. We'll just say it's just one of those days today that things in life are just bad, and God's still there. God's still in it. God hasn't stopped loving us. I haven't stopped loving God, but today is a bad day because some things go wrong. And I think we have to be honest that things are wrong sometimes. And some of those are for decisions we've made. Some of those we do make poor decisions. And I think it's really important that we admit sometimes that, yes, we do make poor decisions. And that, we do get ourselves into places where if we hadn't have made that decision, then we wouldn't be struggling as hard as we are. But other times life happens, and God's involved in it when life happens as well. He's involved, in my job at CAT, but he was also involved in my job when I was at Barclays. And he's, and I can, looking back now, I mean, I've just taken this, a voluntary redundancy, but I took a downgrade just after COVID because I didn't like going on the phones, basically. I took a downgrade. Now, if I hadn't have taken that downgrade, I wouldn't have been able to get to apply for voluntary redundancy because they only did it for that one grade. And there's only 2 of us in the bank who did that. None of the others, even though they wanted it, were able to apply for voluntary redundancy. So I just feel like God was in that decision. And my manager said there's no chance that you're going to get it because your work's too good. You work on our key days, blah de blah. She said just prepare yourself that I'm 99.9% certain that you will not be successful. So I'd gone into that meeting to see her after she'd been to the area directors, and they said. So I was already in a grump. I've been in a grump all day. I've been foul all day to everybody. And so she saw me at the end of the day and she said, "You look really nervous." I'm thinking, I'm not really nervous. I'm really angry and I'm ready to lay into you when you tell me that I haven't got it. But actually, she just said, "We've got it." And I just went, "Yes!" And I went round and hugged them all. And I just felt this is got to be some involvement. I just feel that God has his hands on my life, whatever, in the good times and the bad times. And he can, that's just what I really felt God's hand and touch on that. That, if I hadn't have done those things, which we prayed about and felt was the right thing to do, then I wouldn't have been able to be, in this position where now, as my mum's getting more poorly and stuff like that and needing me to be more flexible in my working, I wouldn't be able to be around there for her. So, and now I feel like in November when I finish my gardening leave that, there's new things, new horizons, new adventures, which I'm really excited about. So,
and I find that a really hard space to hold because you're sort of describing a middle ground, which is difficult, but I can see that really is really right because on the one hand, I kind of would want to say, well, God doesn't actually act very often in space and time, and that's fine. I can kind of deal with God just not doing much, and I accept that God doesn't really intervene when people pray. And then at the other extreme, you might say, well, God answers all our prayers and everything will work out fine because God will fix stuff. And you're describing beautifully a place in the middle which lives with the fact that no, God doesn't always answer prayers, even grindingly just hideous things like a child dying, and yet you're still able to hold a space where God does sometimes fix a job for you. And
I mean, I think Psalm 139 is such a key psalm for me that he knitted me in the utmost darkness of my mother's womb. And that was really key for me throughout the many miscarriages that I had before Jake and afterwards. That knitting together in the womb of the children I had and, of Jake and of myself, that God is involved in all parts of his creation. And who am I in my small infinite mind to be able to think that I understand such a magnificent God who can create a human being and can create all these things that, who can create the world in its infinity. That's probably the rubbish word, actually. But in its smallness and its largeness, who am I to try and get to say that God should do this and shouldn't do that? And that's. But I do. That's why it's my favourite psalm. All of it, even the scary bit at the end in the last few verses.
The angry bit. Yeah.
The angry bit. Yes.
I mean, for me, the key here in what you're saying is it's God's presence. It's not so much, he's fixing this for me or didn't fix that for me, but I'm taking everything that there is out of his hands. I mean, if I were able to number the stars in the sky, even there you are. So it's like, well, where can I flee from your presence? I mean, that's the refrain of that song, isn't it? And yes, I just looked it up.
Yeah.
And that then contextualizes the last bit, if only God, you would slay the wicked away from me. And so it's him railing against the world he can't control. And it's all held by that, wait a minute, there's something bigger out here. You're just part and parcel of it. And as long as you don't forget that God's around you, who are you to figure it out? So like you were saying, Leah, I'm also more on the side of those who say, well, whatever, who knows if God intervenes in the world at all. But I think you need to hold a space where you can receive from God whatever there is and be thankful for it, because you didn't bring it about, nor did you cause it.
No.
In terms of your son's death or something, we are held by something much larger than ourselves.
And it's still okay to be angry.
It's still okay to be angry because we don't get it. Yeah.
No, and I won't. I won't understand. Somebody said, "Oh, well, you'll understand it all in heaven." I said, "Well, probably when I'm in heaven, I won't really care." What heaven's like. I mean, Andy and I were just discussing this phenomenon on the way here, and he started talking about parallel universes and all sorts of things, and we went on from a great big tangent. So, we started. We said it doesn't mean, because we were talking about Andy's aunt and that she died, and sort of whether or not she made a decision and things like that. And I said, but I feel like with God that he will always give us opportunities for us to make a decision. He intervened. The person who we went to a funeral today was such a celebration. This guy was 97, and he was a fantastic man of God. Very, very knowledgeable, great scholar, but also really naughty and mischievous as well. So it was such a celebration of his life, because we just knew him, and we didn't realise that Andy's aunt just happened to have met his wife in a hospital many years ago. We only found this out a few years ago when we were in Windsor, and Andy's aunt met this lady Sylvia, and I was just thinking, that's brilliant, because we've talked about our faith, but there's another conversation. So hopefully she will have made that decision too.
And it must really fit you so well for doing the CAP work, all that you've been through, because as you meet people whose lives are, as you say, painful and full of things that they don't understand and that have happened to them, you can come with such sympathy and empathy.
It does enable me to be able to sit alongside them, and I think that helps, because they don't think that, oh, here's the goody two shoes who's got it all sorted, and here you go. So they'll be telling me, and they said, well, you don't understand. I said, no, I don't understand your situation, but this is a bit of my story, and if you want to, I can talk to you more about it, or I don't have to. It's up to you. But I do understand some of the pain that you're going through, because, and so I think that's where it is. I feel like God softened my edges. But I know it could well have easily gone the other way, because there was a horrendous statistic that 70% of people who've lost children marriages break down.
Yes. Yeah.
But when we got married, nearly 35 years this year, I remember the preacher at the sermon said there was I can't remember the name of the battalion, but he said, I feel that this is important for you. There's a battalion who actually have been able to wear their berets back to front, because on this particular battle, I haven't the foggiest idea which battle it was, but they actually went up and they fought back to back against what was happening. And he said, I think that's really key for you two, that some things you will have to be leaning against each other and fight back to back. And there are times that Andy and I physically do that in the kitchen or wherever it is. We will just stand together and go, this is a back-to-back situation, and lean against each other. And I think that's the only way. I mean, I really feel that Andy is a gift of God to me, because I would not have been able to get through this time without his support. And I wouldn't be able to do the stuff in CAP without him.
And now you do what they tell you. And now you do what they told you. Now you're under control. Now
So
you
that's
do
a lovely
what
image. Is there also a dimension? Can we translate this a bit more into the church and its relation to your clients, for example? Because sometimes it feels that when Christians help, it becomes a sort of pseudo-colonial thing, right? So we're here to help you, we're here to lift you up and so on. And you got the sort of big, strong person who's got it all sorted reaching out. Are we missing something? Do we need to lean against the people who are usually on the fringes maybe, or who are maybe not in church but can teach us something about life that sort of the more less experienced among us of the sort of difficulties of life need to know about and understand?
And I think it's so important that we, as people who are working in the community, go with the people who are already doing a really good job in the community, because we learn so much from them. Because they have been working in those fields. And I think it's really important that you go alongside people. You don't try and be a white saviour or whatever it is and try and fix people. You cannot fix people. And I'm not in this job to fix people. That it's so easy to go into that mindset and go, because I can do that myself. You go, right, okay, so that's wrong, let's fix it. And that's not always helpful. Sometimes you just need to help people to fix it themselves, because otherwise you're disempowering them as well.
That's right. And have there been situations where you felt you've learned from the people that you've helped, that they taught you something about life? Yes, I think I have. There's sort of certain characters who I think of, which I won't go into here, but they've taught me to sort of think a little bit more outside the box even more. Some have challenged my attitudes on race. Sometimes they've challenged my attitudes on my middle classness. And the way I think that things should be done. They've come in at things at a different angle that I'm thinking. First of all, you just think, well, that's crazy, and then you think, well, actually, no, that still works. You can you can worship God wherever you are. You don't have to be in a church building. If I think there's a massive benefit of people coming together on a Sunday and worshipping together, encouraging each other. But I was at that funeral today, keep going back to his funeral, and there were lots of people that I haven't seen for ages. They were friends, and we were all encouraging each other, lifting each other up, telling each other what grandson's done and this done and that done. And there was a real feeling of fellowship in that. And it was, and we had gone on then, we were worshipping God as well and singing and praising and about this
great man of God as well. And there's just a feeling of community there with people that I haven't seen, some of them, probably for about 30 years. So, church is important. I think the church service, and I missed so much going to a church service in COVID. I really could not, and I still cannot, get into going online. But I think it's important that I'm not everybody. Some people will find worshipping online. My parents now hardly ever go to church because they can't. But they get great joy and great really feel part of their community just because they go onto Zoom. And still feel, and the people come round to their house and stuff like that. They're still part of the church. Nobody would say that they're not part of the church, even though they haven't been for the last 6-8 months, and probably won't.
So I feel like you've described at least 2 things that are like really amazing, beautiful properties of church. You've described this these people who sat next to you or slept in the bedroom, or were just with you and there for you. And I feel like that's a real challenge. And you've also described leaders who said it was all right to be angry or to be whatever you were. And I feel like that's if that was our idea of church, that would be those 2 things together are almost, maybe not the whole picture, but they're a huge, brilliant thing that we could have. I think the thing about what you've been saying that's really challenged me is that I need everything to be right, not just some things. So you described a church where at least you had lots of black and white ideas, and you've kind of changed to be more grey. So to me, I really struggle with thinking about anything positive about that because I sort of had that part of it wrong, if you see what I mean. And I think Leah's experience or vision or whatever it was from a couple of episodes ago, it's part of the same challenge for me of this idea that everything has to be absolutely right. Sorry, Leah, you should probably say what it was.
Yeah, I mean, it's really stuck with me, actually. I've found it a real help as I've been in church since then. That I just had this vision sitting outside the church. You know how old our church is. It was almost like a ghostly moment where I saw like all the people that had gone in and out of the church for like hundreds of years.
Oh, wow.
And all the different fantastic views that they'd have had, and all the different dodgy views that they'd have had, and all the things that they would be fundamentalist about, and all the things that they were, all just, I was like, and all in it all, God was still there. God. And there were vicars who were corrupt, and there were vicars who were amazing, and the whole landed gentry, and the whole thing just kind of came.
Bit of slavery thrown in there,
exactly.
And all sorts of
there
things.
was all sorts of terrible and wonderful things going on, and yet still the church stands, and still God is still working through us all. And it gave me something of an ability to be less perfectionist about. Because if I'm not careful, I sit in church thinking, well, I don't agree with that. And, that's words of those songs, it's dreadful. And I'm not sure I can sing this bit. And, what are they saying now? And I've picked off in my head like 20 things that I disagree with before the service is half an hour in. And that's a terrible attitude to go to church in. And by the end of that process, instead of going to church and feeling in community with these people, I've gone to church and felt entirely estranged from them because I disagreed. And that's just horrible. And it was not life-giving to me nor to the people around me. So I think just having that experience has somehow changed something in me. And wouldn't it be wonderful if we all got it right all the time? But we're also so many million miles away from that.
Yeah, and I think that's the beauty of church, is that all of us are at different stages, and some of us have got some things sort of, you would say, sort of almost sorted in your heads, but other things aren't. Where somebody else has got that bit sorted, but not that bit, and that's the beauty of us all coming together, where you can rub off each other and rub off the sharp bits. And I'm not thinking that you're all just moulding into one blob of greyness in the middle, because that would be really boring. And I think that's the wonderfulness of, oh, such bad English, the greatness of God's creation is the shocking reds of a red rose, but also its sharpness of its thorns. Then you've got a beauty of a magnificent sunflower, which is so different. And then you've got, the rolling seas, and they're all everything's so different in his creation. But no, you wouldn't say, well, I'm sorry, you can only be a rose. You can't be a sunflower, because roses are right, but sunflowers aren't. It's all, and I think that's why I want with meeting different people out in the community, you can just see wonderful things in each one of those people, how much God, loves them. And the fact that, we were talking earlier about how a member of our church went round to see one of our clients. I didn't send her round, she just happened to go round there, and how much she blessed that client just at that time. She didn't know that going to her door with a big basket of apples and peaches would make such a difference to her life, but it did. And we all have things which, I know I'm really grumpy sometimes, and my children will say that I'm irritable, and that I get up in bad moods and I shout at them and all of those things, and I have to try and put on that Sunday face and pretend that I'm perfect when I go into the church and I haven't been screaming at them to get out of the car. But we're all like that in some ways, that we're not perfect, and that's what I love about church, is that I know most people are just rubbing along exactly the same time, and if they are perfect, then that's their sin, and they shouldn't be pretending to be perfect.
Maybe we should have more testimonies in church about the things that we're struggling with. Or
screaming at the kids.
That is everybody's reality, but yet often the stories that we tell in church are, well, I had this problem and I prayed and God fixed it. And that's wonderful when that happens, but we shouldn't only hear those stories. We should hear even someone standing up the front and saying, this has happened and it's awful and I don't know what to do.
What's still in the middle. It's not resolved.
But pray with me, pray alongside me in this situation, because this is awful and I'm really struggling in it. But also, being real and saying that I remember, in my previous church, one of the preachers just said, is what you've got a God's idea, or is it just cheese? Have you had a dream about what God's telling you to do, or have you just eaten some really dodgy cheese the night before and you've just had a really weird? He said, don't always think that what you've got is a great holiness. You just go out, you test it with people, you talk it through. And I think that's one of the brilliant things about church as a community, that you've got people who have got different experiences. They come from different places. They can help you. They can talk into your situation. And it will be the most surprising people who actually say something and you go, oh yeah, that's right, that's got me right there, because they put their finger on something. And God spoke, well, I would say God's spoken through them into your life.
Can I pick up on something else that you said earlier on? You said we go and as CAP, Christians Against Poverty, we go and help people. We do it for free because we want to show them that Jesus loves them. And I think that's a beautiful sentence. But I have two interpretations about it in my ear. There's one I like and one I don't like. The one I like is Jesus saying, when John asks him, are you the Son of God? Look, lepers are walking, people are changing, there's stuff happening. He's not pointing to, I've taught something really good, or, it's not a churchy thing. It's, I'm out here and that's all there is. That's all it needs. So if the sentence means that, I think that's great. Because it just means we're extending church outward. We're saying, look, this person got free of debt. Awesome. That's the kingdom of God. But there can be, and in some of the messaging that we sometimes see from CAP in church, like on their videos and so on, there can be that instrumental quality to it.
Right.
You know, I was poor. I was in debt. Somebody came and helped me. Now I know Jesus. And that's where I get really shaken inside a little bit, because then it feels like it's just a trick to get people to church. You know, like, do you feel that tension when you do the work? Like, where is it? You know, have you ever sat there and felt like, wow, this is God's work right in the middle of what I'm doing right now, whether this person comes to church or not? Or is there always that sense of the end game is person comes and prays to Jesus?
I think what you're saying, and I think some people are like that.
Right.
I'm not personally like that.
Yeah.
I don't see it as a tick box. And the people I go to see are not projects.
Right.
They're individuals. And I may be someone who just comes into their life, and later on, 40 years down the line or something, they'll say there was something different about them, and they came to do something for me, and they didn't want anything. They just wanted to do it because they wanted to show me that they love me, and that's fine. But I'm not in there to go tick box, well, yeah, I've succeeded with you because you're a Christian. There are people who I've known who have come back into the church because the thing which was weighing them down and dragging them down was their debt.
They were ashamed.
They were ashamed. They felt separated from everything because that was their mental health, and so that's brought them back into church, and that's fantastic. But I don't think the person who has said, "No, I don't want you to pray with me." Right. I don't think of that person any less, and I don't think I failed with that person.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel I failed if the person gives up and doesn't carry on with me, so doesn't and stays in debt. Then I feel like a little bit like I failed because I've lost that communication with them. But I would never feel that I failed because they haven't come to church.
I want to jump in here because I don't want to accuse you, Jörg, but I want to accuse myself. I quite often think of the thing of it being like a trick, and I really rail against that. Like, you know, what trick can we use to fool someone into becoming a Christian, kind of thing? And do you feel tricked, Andy? What that reveals about me is that I actually don't think it's a very good thing to become a Christian. Underneath, that's what that's saying about me. And I think the challenge that we had, especially from Esther when we spoke to Esther, and I imagine also from Sue, is that Esther and Sue think it actually is a good thing to be a Christian. Therefore, it's not really a trick in the first place. You know, it's like a gift or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I know some things. If you've got if you know something is really good, why would you not want to share it with somebody? And so that's what I do. I'd love to share about God with them, but if they don't want to, that's also fine.
But that's the thing I was getting at. Not so much that individually what you do or whatever, but like how narrow our vision of the kingdom of God can sometimes be. That we are not able to celebrate that moment. Say, well, you know, this is the good thing. You're debt free. That's the good thing.
Yeah.
You know, we stuck together, and we did this because I saw something in you. You shouldn't be living with this burden. Like, that's the kingdom of God to me. Like, that's already enough, right? So because we have somehow put up this wall between church and the outside world, we sometimes can't see that anymore as saying like, oh, that's Jesus working right here in the community. Because we're like, well, no, the goal is always going to have to be, you know, you're going to join us every Sunday or something like that. And that's such a poor view of church. Sorry, yeah.
I like what you were saying before about that you now see church as people coming to all sorts of different things at church. So even if your goal were to get people into church, even by getting people to come along to, say, the community fridge or the Hope Cafe or the sewing group or whatever, what you're saying to us now is that you see that as them becoming part of church. And you were saying, I think it was before we started recording, you were saying that all those people would consider St John's as their church.
Yeah, if you spoke to somebody at the Hope Hub who doesn't come on a Sunday, they would say that St John's is their church. there's people who come on just to a Wednesday service. That's still a service. They're no less a person than the person who comes to every 3 services on a Sunday.
That's another lesson for me, which is I often worry whether I'm really part of the church, and I should, get over it.
Get a life then.
I guess I was trying to push the boundaries even further. It has nothing to do with can we go beyond St. John's and say, well, every time, and that's how I hear Jesus, every time somebody's debt is forgiven, that's the kingdom of God. He doesn't say every time somebody's debt is forgiven because he's prayed to Jesus or he's prayed to God. Like there's and I'm not for once saying that's the same as being right with God, right? But what is the vision that we're after when it's become so narrow, like, gotta have you pray the sinner's prayer, when we could have a vision of church and kingdom of God that says, these are signs of what God wants you to be. These are signs of heaven. And the debt that was forgiven to you, this is part of that symbol, of that sign, of that coming hope that there's more to life than whatever's weighing you down right now.
It's the outworking, isn't it?
Yeah.
An outworking of God's love is that he doesn't want you burdened by the debt of money or the debt of sin.
And none of that has to do with Wednesday services, Sunday
and
services.
I think that's why CAPS celebrate everybody going debt free.
Yeah.
They don't just celebrate when people become Christians.
That's right.
That's why I have certificates to give out when people come debt free. I don't very often give them out because sometimes I think the people don't always want that. That can be a bit cheesy. But sometimes some people that I know I think would really relish that, then I will give those out. But you think, yes, a person may not have shown any interest in Christ at all or church at all, but then suddenly you'll be having a little talk and they'll just say something. You just think they have listened. They have listened. They may not be coming to church, but they'll say, well, since I've known you, Sue, things have been different. And I say, and then later on I said, well, I'll continue to pray for you. But sometimes I think, I really wish they could see it was God working in their life. But they don't always see that. But hopefully one day they will do. But the decisions are down to them as an individual. All individual. We're not, though we are like sheep who've gone astray, we're not like sheep, if you see what I mean.
And when Jesus goes to the tax collector's house, all he says at the end is, I'm going to pay back everybody who I owe. Right? And what does Jesus say next? The kingdom of God has come to your house.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all it took in this place. So I think that's wonderful when people say to you, something's been different. It's like, because God is here. You might not want to put it in these words, but that's how I see it. And there's a sign of that sort of hope of a different life that Jesus has promised us.
And it's like, obviously we've just had the holiday club at St. John's, and 150 children or a whole pile of leaders all in the church for a week. And I remember speaking to someone after a previous holiday club and them saying, a few weeks after, saying, but so few of the people actually, come to church, and they might come for that first week, and then, cause they sort of try to roll it into the Sunday service at the end of the week, don't they? It's just so sad. And I'm like, well, is it sad? Like 150 children have had a week when every single morning they were loved, cared for, played with, looked after, talked to by some really fantastic adults and older young people.
The church was full of children. We could celebrate these little minds waking up.
Exactly. And so, it was such a even if they only ever come to holiday club once, it's so much the kingdom of God being advanced, because there's so much blessing and love and joy that goes out in that week, and all the amazing stuff that Robin and Rachel do, and that's a blessing in itself, no matter if any of them ever come to church.
But, and a lot of those people have already got connections with Playbox or Playtime or infant feeding, or they've been been involved in come along to the Hope Hub, or they've been at Manor School and they've listened to an assembly and they've not seen Rachel there, and that's where they've heard about it. Or there's all, it's a bit like those, you know, in the films where you see those vines growing off really quickly. It just feels a bit like that. You know, I mean, though Holiday Club is completely and utterly exhausting, and I'm always really glad when it's over, and I always dread it coming, I still love it, and I still love being involved in it, and I wouldn't not want to be involved in it. And I mean, it's just brilliant. I mean, the likes of my lovely Timmy can be involved in the cameras. And involved in the tech team, whereas he wouldn't really want to be doing anything else. But he was there at 8 o'clock in the morning, a teenager
In a school holiday.
in a school holiday at church at 8 o'clock, helping other people
Yeah.
Without shouting?
without shouting.
Goodness.
I was like in a different world,
Yeah.
because he doesn't. And same with Katie. I mean, Harry's always up, but you know, Katie was there every morning as well, and they weren't moaning about it.
Yeah, actually, even Joseph made it there on time.
Yeah.
It's quite impressive.
Yeah,
He didn't run to church every day because he left the house too late, but he did make it there.
Yeah.
And there were pastries when they got there. we
Yes,
found out.
they did. Did that does help? Yeah, yes, but they had that enthusiasm that they wanted to be involved in something, and Harry was desperate to be involved in it, to just and they find it exciting to be able to be part of the whole thing, which was church in a different way.
Some of those that work forces.
I think through a lot of the things you've said, Sue, it really strikes me that you see God turning up and you expect God to turn up, despite the massive challenge you've had to that in your life. I went to Greenbelt Festival last weekend, just for the day, in an attempt to find something like church, right? It's not part of me. And that's full of a load of people who I would be tempted to think of as more like heretical, like me. And what really struck me about that day was all these sort of crazy heretics, a lot of them were expecting God to turn up, despite their different interpretation of what God is, or what the kingdom of God is.
Yeah, who's a heretic if there's no God?
Well, so yeah, I was really struck by that, and I think it really chimes with what you're saying. You know, you see God working in all these places.
I mean, I'm not saying that I had this viewpoint all the way along.
No,
because Andy said to me the other day after Jake died, he said, "I lost you for a while." That I wasn't, and he said the real Sue's come back now. But I said I didn't realise that. But he said that it was almost like I was. I don't know, it's like squashed. And yeah, I mean, there was quite a few Sundays. There was quite a few months after Jake died that we didn't go to church at all. But we still knew we had to go to. So we'd go to the garden centre.
right.
And church became our garden centre. The garden centre became our church, and we just would go there almost religiously to a different garden centre. But had to be ones which we'd never taken Jake to, which got quite tricky.
Right.
But then we knew that we should be somewhere on a Sunday. So even in the midst of all this, where we were trying to work out what's going on and the pain and all of that lot, we knew that we should be somewhere on a Sunday, whether that was to do with tradition of already going or whatever. But we knew that actually if we were at church, it would be better. Not fixed, but better than the garden centre. Because the garden centre doesn't really do it, even though it does nice coffee.
Yeah, I mean, there is something powerful about forcing yourself to break, for a while in a week, and to sit there with your thoughts, your questions. I must confess, I'm often in church in the same spirit that Leah just described, and I haven't seen the ghosts yet. And yet, I walk out of there many times, not always, but many times, strangely settled. I don't want to say elated because that's a bit too much for me, but settled. Because I had to sit somewhere and listen to other people, like you were saying, other ideas rubbing off on me that I don't want to hear in my day-to-day life, that I don't get to hear in my day-to-day life. We all have our sort of echo chambers that we live in, the kind of books we read, and the thought worlds that we dwell in. And to be somewhere where you're exposing yourself to, like, no, you just got to be quiet. It's not your speaking right now. It's not your thoughts. There's some songs you're going to have to suffer through that you would not write this way. And that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. So they're sort of encouraging, to be different, to have this sort of experience of difference. And I wonder, actually, if we need to expand it a bit more to experience a lot more difference, in our, should, just the same as I need that space on a Sunday to expose myself to theological thoughts that I probably wouldn't want to entertain. Maybe it's also important to expose myself to other people's lives a lot more than the sort of little world. You talked about middle classness, or the sort of work worlds that we all live in. We often too narrow in what we open ourselves up to.
I mean, you can become overcritical too, I think. I mean, I remember sitting there thinking, I'm not going to sing this song because it says, I can't even remember the song, but it says, the Lord gives and takes away. And I'm thinking, I'm not singing this in a joyful, because it's a joyful, jolly. And I thought, this is a rubbish song. I refuse to sing this song in this way. And I just thought, yeah, but actually, in the fact that the Lord does give and take away, there is a joy in it. The fact that I don't feel like emotionally sing. I mean, one of the songs in the Holiday Club was Show Me the Way to Amarillo, and they changed that and put Christian words to it. The kids absolutely loved it. They loved it. But it was one of Jake's favourite songs. So for the first 3 days, I had to go out. The first day, it was we call it tripwires, Andy and I, where something gets you, just go, so I had to go out and I had a cry. And then Tuesday and Wednesday, I went in and I thought, no, I can't cope with this. I went and got a croissant, and then Wednesday I stayed a bit longer. And then Thursday was there and Andy was there. Now, different things will set Andy off that I don't know. And he was there. He was singing. He was in it. He was remembering Jake, loving that song. He was getting there, and I was thinking, he can do it, I can do this. And so I got into, and then by Sunday, I was singing it along with them. But it's, different things affect different people in different ways. Some people will love some songs, some people will hate other songs. I hate I Am a New Creation, but other people will think it's the most wonderful song in the world.
Right. Well, and you don't even have to sing it. Sometimes it just means that you're there and you're exposing yourself to somebody else's favourite song that you just, at home, you'd be like, well,
you can watch other people enjoying it and finding God in it.
Yeah, exactly. And this is what your ghosts do so well, that they take you out of the picture and say, well, wait a minute, you're just a borrowed role. The lady in the fancy hat had that role 150 years ago, or the weird little academic guy or whatever had my role, whatever. But we're just a part of a much larger story, and by sort of taking ourselves so seriously that we think, it really matters what I'm thinking right now.
Yeah, and it has to be right.
It has to be right.
Perceive it. Yeah. I do think though that the other part of that, which I think you're describing, is the thing that I described as like sitting next to people as well. Like even. Like, obviously, sitting next to people in great suffering is a huge gift and important thing. But also, just sitting next to people in ordinary stuff is part of what we're about, right? Of being together.
Yeah.
And we don't sit next to each other much anymore, do we? I was thinking on flights recently how, right now we are, But, like, on flights, how it used to be such a standard that you would hear somebody's story, right? I mean, that was just because there's nothing else to do. There was only 2 movies, one at the start and one at the end. So you have to do something. Now it's just you stare at your phone. And you're like, or if you're sitting in the train, you're not looking at your phone. People thinking, why is he staring at me? Like, keep you to yourself. And like the spaces are shrinking.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, virtual spaces are plenty, but those are again echo chambers, self-selected groups, and the spaces where you sit together and you endure and rejoice and are next to each other, present. They've gone.
The places where you would actually sit to something which you perhaps don't quite agree with, because as we were talking before about the television and things you don't feel comfortable, I'll go off and make a cup of tea or I'll scroll on my phone, whereas you don't do that in church. I mean, my daughter hates it when I talk to random people. She's really, and sometimes I just do it just to annoy her. So we were on the plane the other day back from the Netherlands. I was just chatting to the guy beside me, and I could feel my Katie beside me. But
Let me introduce you to my daughter Katie.
Yeah, she would she would kill me if I did that. But yeah, but it was just interesting to hear his story, because I'd sat next to him. He was all covered in tattoos, and I assumed he was one type of person. He started talking, and he was a completely different person.
Right.
And I just thought, that's just it was just me thinking. Looking at the outside of him. And we can look at some people and just think, in church, well, they've got it all together, or they haven't got it all together. And we just put people in little boxes, and I think that's really, really sad when we just want to be able to just, talk and involve people. So that's why I think church on Sundays is so important, that you can mix with a whole group of different people and learn. I mean, lots of the people in the church I wouldn't have normally anything to do with some of those people, because they are not my normal set of friends that I would go to. And in some ways, all my closest friends now have moved away, and they've gone to different churches, and so I don't have that my bestie friend which I sit next to anymore, because they're not there. So it makes me open up to other people and talk to other people, which is probably what God wants me to do in the first place, and not just sit there and criticise and do things which I used to do when I was in my old church.
Cool. Well, thank you very much, Sue. It's a massive privilege and an honour to be able to talk to you. So thank you for being so honest with us. I was wondering, we normally have a reading at the end. I was wondering whether we wanted Psalm 139, if you've still got it. Would you mind reading it, Jörg?
I can, or Sue can. Maybe. Yeah.
Would you like to read it? Or would you like Jörg to read it?
I'll read it if you want.
Yeah. There you go.
You have searched me, Lord, and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you, Lord, know it completely. You hem me in, behind and before, and you lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too lofty for me to attain. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. If I rise on the wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far side of the sea, even there your hand will guide me. Your right hand will hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness will hide me and the light become night around me, even the darkness will not be dark to you. The night will shine like the day, for the darkness is as light to you. For you created me, for you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made, and your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. How precious to me are your thoughts, God. How vast is the sum of them. Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of the sand. When I awake, I am still with you. If only you, God, would slay the wicked away from me, you who are bloodthirsty. They speak of you with evil intent. Your adversaries misuse your name. Do I not hate those who hate you, Lord, and abhor those who are in rebellion against you? I have nothing but hatred for them. I count them my enemies. Search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is an offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting.
You know, I used to miss the joke in that psalm, but now I hear it. Like how that sort of horrible bit at the end is really him realizing, wait a minute, I'm going off the rails.
Yeah.
I want you, I've just talked about how you have knit everything together. You know everything. Now I'm trying to instruct you and say, oh, well, God, maybe you search me and see if there's anything wrong in my thoughts.
Yes.
I missed that joke.
Yeah,
Because quite often people just finish just before the end, don't they?
Yeah.
Don't do the nasty bit. But actually the nasty bit's really important too.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, listener. And we'll see you next time.
Yeah.
Kill it in the name of. Kill it in the name of. Kill it in the name of.
You've been listening to Justice Warriors. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and you can also follow us on social media by searching for Justice Warriors, where warrior is spelt like someone who worries about things. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave us a rating, since that helps other people find us. Also, please tell your friends about us in real life. We'd love to hear from you. To get in touch, use the email address in the show notes or contact us via the social media links. Thanks for listening.
Now you do what they told you. Now you do what they told you.